Patricia, Neil, thank you for the honor of being named to the 2018 Irish America Business 100 and serving as the keynote for today's luncheon as a representative of this year's class of honorees. Congratulations to all who have been named to this year's listing. Each of you has a unique story to tell about the path that has led to this recognition, both personally and professionally, a glimpse of which is highlighted in the January edition of Irish America. How fitting that we have the opportunity to come to know one another through stories. Storytelling is the flagship of Irish folklore. In the ancient Celtic culture, the history and laws of the people were not written down, but memorized in long lyric poems which were recited. Sounds kind of like Broadway's Hamilton to me. You see, the Irish have been trailblazers for centuries. So much of the infrastructure that we enjoy today, our bridges, tunnels, and rails, were laid down by the Irish. Our ancestors knew how important connections were, having come from an island themselves. So the inspiration for my remarks today about connecting with our past via the story of my grandparents and the traits I believe I have inherited from them and the lessons their experiences have taught me. Hopefully, you can make a connection as well. Each of my 4 grandparents emigrated from Ireland in their late teens, leaving their families behind and setting sail for New York. They had the hope of escaping poverty and building a brighter tomorrow. How awesome that a century later, that their granddaughter stands at a podium addressing some of the most accomplished business leaders of Irish descent in a room they could have only dreamt to have been invited to enter. I'll start with my father's father, Terence McDonnell. He grew up on a dairy farm in the west of Ireland, but when he arrived in America, there was, to say the least, not much of a job market for dairy farmers in New York City. So what did Terence do? He reinvented himself. He went to work in a grocery store and rose to become a manager of an A&P and moonlighted as a bartender in Richmond Hill, Queens. Economically, the most successful of my grandparents. My grandfather demonstrated that adaptability and relationship skills are transferable and oftentimes even more valuable than technical abilities. Not too different from my choice to go from nursing student to computer programmer to insurance executive. Grandpa McDonnell married Veronica McNicholas from Bahola in County Mayo. The eldest children of her family, including my grandmother, left Ireland first. Veronica's 2 sisters contracted tuberculosis on the boat coming over, and she buried them in their early 20s. By the time Veronica's 3 younger siblings were old enough to leave Ireland, America had turned its face against immigrants from Ireland, enacting severe quotas and limitations. Her siblings couldn't join her in America, so they went to England instead. She never saw them again. In effect, she lost just about her entire family. It made her very guarded. I'm sure you could understand why. Our experiences shape us, but Veronica's experiences made her very strong. I'm guessing that each of our honorees today have faced challenges along the way that could have sidetracked their success. It was their strength that came through adversity that separated them as leaders. Early in my career, I faced obstacles. I was a young woman in a male-dominated industry. I worked very hard to gain respect, but it didn't always come easy. In fact, one of the senior managers that I called on my first day as a 27-year-old vice president told me he didn't answer to his wife, and he certainly wasn't going to answer to me. I told him very politely that I was going to hang up the phone and call him back and pretend that that conversation never happened. And he was cooperative from that point on. So as the adage goes, whatever doesn't kill you. My mother's father was Martin King from the fishing village of Quilty in County Clare. He was from a family of fishermen. His father was one of the brave seamen who in 1907 set out in their boats into a winter storm to rescue the crew of a French three-master, Leon XIII, which had driven onto the rocks. In gratitude, the French government rebuilt the parish church, and the ship's bell still sits on its altar today. Martin King was not an educated man. He left school after the 8th grade. In America, he drove a New York City bus, a good job, but hardly a prestigious one. And he certainly had no formal training in music. He couldn't read a note. But he was a highly accomplished performer of traditional Irish music on traditional Irish instruments: the tin whistle, the flute, the clarinet, the accordion, and the fiddle. He learned them the traditional way, by listening and practicing. Nobody taught him. He learned because he loved music. Not unlike the journeys of our honorees here today, there was no sheet music to follow to achieve success. The lesson here: it is not what you're taught, it is what you learn by following your passion. Despite not having any role models along the way that looked like me, I followed my passion and asked for help. This gave me the confidence I needed to blaze new trails. And finally, my mother's mother was Anna McIntyre from Carrigallen in Leitrim. She had quite a different personality than my other grandmother. She was completely open and free with her love. She had come here as a teenager, worked domestic jobs, became above all a mother and a homemaker dedicated to family and her community. She never had the opportunity to complete high school or college. All the same, she always knew what was going on in the world. She was well-read and very interested in political and global issues. In high school, when I was asked to do a television interview about events in Africa and other third world countries, it was she that offered me help to prepare. Little did I know that her knowledge came from an Irish-based charity, likely concerned worldwide. Great leaders recognize that success is based on the success of others, and that they are part of something bigger than themselves. The Irish has done this well. We have given back much to our communities, not only in business, but in the fields like education and healthcare and first responders. I believe this is why we as a group have been successful immigrants. Adaptability, strength in adversity, lifelong learning, a shared sense of belonging. While my grandparents never received recognition like we are witnessing here today, they certainly possessed many of the same characteristics of that of our Business 100. The Irish certainly don't have a monopoly on these qualities, but I think they're central to the national character, both at home and abroad. They're certainly my Irish inheritance, and the legacy I hope to leave behind to my daughter and the company I'm privileged to lead, Penn Mutual. So a century after my grandparents arrived on these shores to become Americans, I stand here proud today to call myself an Irish American and stand shoulder to shoulder with the other honorees here today. Congratulations, Erin Gobra.